So the question has been, I don't want to be too, sort of silly about this, but in part, this was this kind of piecemeal to some extent, country by country, saying which part of the system do we have to guarantee to keep people's money in, to keep people, and then you were getting these extreme, I have a friend who's on the board of a local bank in Philadelphia and in the suburbs of Philadelphia, in the main line in Bryn Mawr. And he said that they had a person who literally came and wanted to withdraw over $20 million. And they had you had a 48 hours notice, and then they had a Brinks truck went. And it was just some quirky person. And they walked out of the Brinks were with $20 million. And they had a big argument about the denominations of the money. But I mean, theoretically, I guess you can get this. And they brought the Brinks truck to his house, as I understand. And the person who dropped it off said when he left, half of it was in a safe, but there wasn't enough. And when he left, at least half of it was on a dining room table, right? I will not give you the address to that, but you can't. What you can't have in a society is that kind of run, right? Whether it's on money markets or trade, you can't have that. You can't have this sense that there's going to be this general default because you've got this extraordinary amount. You've got these toxic assets out there that are creating a liquidity problem, creating insolvency some places within the global marketplace. At the same time, you had a whole set of institutions which all of a sudden it becomes clear that their model maybe worked at a certain point, but the model doesn't work anymore. So standalone investment banks, right? I mean, what everybody know what a leverage rate is, the amount of what you owe to what to what your equity is. So on a strong bank, a leverage ratio would be, I don't know, you'd have 10% capital, for the rest of it would be deposits and other kinds of financial instruments that you owe back out. Well, in Goldman Sachs or in Morgan Stanley, the leverage ratios were 35 to 1. That's pretty risky, but they had lots of hedges to that risk. And when markets were good, it was okay. And when markets weren't so good, all of a sudden the model didn't seem to work. And so you saw, what did you see? You saw a whole bunch of investment banks just, go away, right? And the last two standalone ones, Morgan and Goldman, overnight the Fed said, we're giving you a bank holding company status, but you've got a couple years to get to that point. But you could ask reasonably, what the hell does that mean? It didn't change the model, right? So is there going to be a change even with Morgan and with Goldman? Will they start acquiring banks? Will they become part of it, as Morgan just did with a Japanese bank? Will they become part of a larger? What will begin to happen and begin to play out? So you've got this set, and then finally you got the $700 billion TARP bill, which originally had lots of different negotiations. We were all part of this big public dialogue. I know I talked to several congressional people. And this, by the way, is scary, and I mean no disrespect to the great congressional delegation in the Philadelphia area. But I mean, they're running the country, so it might be good if they knew what a GSE was, right? This is this is actually the part of this that I get nervous about, that we don't know enough about what nobody has to be an expert in any of this. I mean, Lord knows most of the people that screwed it up weren't. But the question becomes, do you have enough public knowledge in order to understand and to ask the right kinds of questions, right? So I remember just chatting with congressional people who would say, where would you go on this? This is what we're hearing from, and where are you? And they, sort of go back and forth on that. And people like me were pushing, among other things, actually, along with this, we're pushing our own view, which was change the bankruptcy bills, change the bankruptcy laws, right? That was a huge one. If you go to bankruptcy court in America right now, the judge can reorganize the debt on your second home or your third home or your yacht, but not your first home, right? And there I was, arguing, seems like that change would be good, you'd be able to keep more people, and I just, sometimes they I don't know. Well, anyway. But so this question, we had this big public dialogue, and now what you're seeing is that we moved from actually just wanting to buy the toxic assets and try to discover the price of it and get the market going, to maybe a strategy which was unveiled in the last couple of days of first investing directly public dollars in the shape of preferred stock in the banking institutions themselves, with the idea that you would recapitalize the banks. Many economists had said that was the way to go. Many other countries went in that direction. Gordon Brown in the UK led the way with that, despite the fact that they're a much smaller economy with not as many problems, although plenty of problems and plenty of bank failures. And to some extent, it was the global coordination and the understanding it would begin to move in that direction that maybe began to change the tenor and tone of things. Now, for regular people like us, right, we know a couple different things. Number one, we know that in 15 months, $2 trillion worth of pension wealth got wiped out. I don't know about you, but I'm going to be working until like I'm 190, right? I'm just like, just forget it, right? I don't even look. I don't even open up anymore, right? And I was in conservative stuff. Hopefully it'll come back. I'm not trying to make light of it, but that is a huge shift in wealth. Number two, what we've learned is that there is this absolutely unprecedented transformation that has happened. We know that the rates of innovation far surpassed the ability of not only the public, but also, when I say public regulation, also private regulation to keep up with it. So did the people at S&P and Moody's, good people, honest people, please, I don't mean anything about that, but did they understand the risk profile of the most exotic of these securities? As one person who, I won't say who it was because you know who that person is, said to me once, if they understood, they would have been working on the street and not working at S&P. And that the guys or the gals that even designed them sort of understood what they would look like and what the risk profile was of those securities. So what was the ability to understand that? What was the ability of the insurers to understand that kind of risk, let alone what was our ability to understand what was going on in the financial services industry and what it meant for us, right? In our household, with our credit cards, with everything. So what we know is that we will have to, one way or the other, we will have to fundamentally, the last time the financial services industry had a huge blast of regulation, the regulation that we largely still are based on, the creation of the SEC, the creation of all sort of the banking infrastructure, that was the 1930s. Things have changed. So what we have got is a 1930s infrastructure with changes, obviously changes in technology and capacity and changes in terms of all sorts of things. But we largely have got the outlines of a 1930s infrastructure for a financial services industry that is radically different, right? And we assumed that the new kinds of securities that were out there and the globalization of those was going to actually limit the amount of risk, systemic risk. Right? That was the argument. And who knows? I mean, that's sort of an interesting argument. Anybody ever read the book The Black Swan? Ever read the book The Black Swan? It's a terrific book. I mean, I just love this book. Right? So The Black Swan is about. Am I messed up with time here? Am I right? So The Black Swan is about. Some of my guy is actually an investment banker, but a sort of an epistemologist and a real character. And for years, people thought that swans were only white. It was just assumed swans are white. And then one day, somebody was in Australia, some Europeans, and they said, oh my God, there's like a black swan. And all of a sudden, their world got turned upside down. So the black swan becomes the metaphor for the fact that we overvalue what we know and we undervalue what we don't.